Happy winter! We are going to talk about themes represented by adaptations of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. I am Matt Scar. My thesis is that adaptations of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by R.L. Stevenson emphasize different themes of the original text depending on the audience and era they were created for, by altering characters and the relationships, introducing new symbolism, and restructuring plot points. We're going to go over the history of adaptations. As you can see, representations of Hyde have gotten less ugly and monstrous over the years, and I know why that is, but I'm not going to tell you until the end, so stick around. The first adaptation came out in 1887, just a year after the novella was published. It is a play by Thomas Russell Sullivan. Major changes to the plot from the novella include Jekyll being given a fiance who he is going to marry like near the end of play, who is Sir Danvers Carew's daughter, and that is who Hyde kills in the book, if you don't remember. Since then, there have been over 123 movie adaptations, along with a lot of different media, and most adaptations actually follow play plot instead of the book plot because it was the first adaptation and just kind of became iconic in its plot points. The most popular adaptation was a movie from 1920 starring John Barrymore, but since then, the musical from 1990 has become a lot more popular. A lot of its songs are like Broadway staples, so that would be the most popular adaptation. And lately, there's been a revival in interest in this story, mainly because of during the pandemic, Gothic stories were really favored due to their like gloominess and moral allegories. There has not been a new adaptation in a while, but I'm guessing there will be with the recent adaptations of Frankenstein and Wuthering Heights. Yeah. So we're gonna go into the first out of three adaptations we're gonna talk about today. The first one is the musical from 1990. So the plot is that Dr. Jekyll is going to marry Emma, Sir Caro's daughter. He has a theory that humans have a dual nature, and so he approaches board of governors of the hospital he works at and asks for a body from a like psych ward to experiment on. They all say no, very wholeheartedly, except for Sir Danvers Carew. And that actually saves his life because once Jekyll experiments on himself and creates Hyde, Hyde goes out and kills all of the board members that denied him his body to experiment on. Both Jekyll and Hyde end up running into a prostitute named Lucy, and they fall in love with her. And as Hyde begins to take control and grow more violent, he gets jealous of Jekyll's relationship with Lucy. Mind you, he has a fiance, but whatever. He gets jealous of Jekyll and kills Lucy. And then at the wedding, Hyde fully takes over Jekyll, and Utterson shoots him, killing both of them, revealing the secret, and that's it. So the main theme in this musical is social constructs and how taboos and class divide are kind of related. You can see this in the musical through the numbers Facade and Bitch, Bitch, Bitch. These are back to back at the beginning of the musical and mirror each other, with the first song being like poor people in London saying at the end of the day, they don't mean what they say, they don't say what they mean, they don't ever come clean. And the answer is it's all a facade. Call a walk promenade, call a street boulevard, grease your hair with pomade, you'll be held in regard. So this is saying that upper class people get away with crimes because they use fancy words, they dress fancy, so they get away with the bad things that they do. And this is kind of confirmed in the next number, where upper class people at the engagement party for Jekyll and Emma are talking trash about their fellow rich people, saying Mrs. Greenville Heath has teeth that are not hers, and then saying that Lord de Vere is queer as hell and bisexual. Um, and homosexuality was a crime back in the Victorian era, and if you were rich, you kind of could get away with it while just being talked bad about. But if you were poor, you're probably gonna get killed or put in prison. So this is showing, rich people get away with the bad things that they do. And we see that in Jekyll getting away with having Hyde at the end. He's not really called a bad person for that. Because he's rich, he gets to do whatever he wants. And you can see this in book when you look at Utterson's perspective on poor people. He goes to Soho to see Mr. Hyde's house, and there's this whole passage. As the cab drew up before the address indicated, the fog lifted a little and showed him a dingy street, a gin palace, a low French eating house, a shop for the retail of penny numbers and two-penny salads, many ragged children huddled in the doorways, and many women of many different nationalities passing out, key in hand, to have a morning glass. And the next moment the fog settled down upon that part as brown as umber and cut him off from his blackguardly surroundings. The imagery here really shows his feelings and thoughts about poor people. The fog symbolizes his distaste for them coming down upon him when he sees these people. Words like blackguardly, brown as umber, dingy. And he is judging these mothers, these poor mothers, um, whose children are like in the doorways while they're drinking. He does not feel good about that. He doesn't like them. But his friend Jekyll, move on. His friend Jekyll, in the paragraph, he has a whole paragraph after he interrogates Jekyll about Mr. Hyde. The hydroponics are going off. Okay. About Mr. Hyde, and he so obviously lies about his connection. And he's obviously doing some shady stuff, but all Utterson can say is poor Harry Jekyll, poor Harry. When he was just criticizing poor people for things that he deems unsavory. Yeah. So, how does this scene pertain to people in around 1990 who haven't read the book because it was pretty much a pop culture thing? People who saw the musical probably did not read the book. And the answer is Ronald Reagan. This was being made in the Reagan era. And if you don't know, Reagan's Reaganomics gave massive tax cuts to the wealthy while putting a war on drugs on like poor neighborhoods and a lot of minorities and creating a whole big class divide, making these groups hate each other and have a lot of resentment towards each other, which really comes out in the musical. So the next adaptation we're going to talk about is Ew, Be Quiet, um, a BBC radio show from 2016. And this was basically made to show what a first draft of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde might have looked like. Because this is Fanny, Robert Louis Stevenson's wife, and she was the first to read his first draft that he wrote in 3 days. And she said, nope, it's trash. The moral allegory isn't clear, and the scenes with Hyde are just too graphic. You need to rewrite this. He did. So this is supposed to kind of be showing what it could have been like. The plot is that Jekyll is a doctor in Edinburgh who abstains from the vices that his rich friends take part in, and he spends most of his time alone in his lab. Lorna Utterson, like the Mr. Utterson, his daughter, becomes concerned when Jekyll leaves all his possessions to Hyde in his will and begins investigating with her friend Christabel. At the same time, they're looking into the murder of a boy named Billy, and they see that a railway in Calgate, which is kind of like the Soho of Edinburgh. You can see here poor families, the streets are dark and everything. Um, a railway there is suspected of using child labor, with Hyde cited as recruiting the children to work and taking a cut of the money. So, not great. Our man Hyde is taking part in organized crime. He's leveled up from his like spur of the moment crimes to child labor. So then when they're in this trial, Hyde and Jekyll both disappear, and a man named George Denman appears. This is something different from the book. This is a new character that is supposed to be a good side of Jekyll. Instead of just making the evil side of himself, he also makes the good side of himself. And Lorna goes to his lab and listens to video recordings that Jekyll made while he was doing his experiments and finds out about what he's done and kills him, shoots him right in the street. Yeah, for the crimes that he did as Hyde, which included rape and some stomping over children. So yeah, she doesn't like that. The theme here is good and evil. You can see that a lot with how there's a good side now. There's not just Jekyll, who's like kind of ambiguous, and Hyde. There's Jekyll, Hyde, and Denman. So you can hear, in a way, the codependency of good and evil in the radio show, how they depend on each other, and you can hear that in Jekyll, Hyde, and Denman's unhappiness. They're all unhappy, and we can hear Hyde talk about that a bit.
Here's a question for your research. What part of me wants to reach with a syringe and effect the change? I'll tell you, not one bit of me. What do I have to look forward to if I do? Nothingness. Ceasing to be. That's it. It's you that wants the change, not me.
So as you can hear, once good and evil are split, the good and evil sides they're not happy because they're not people. They don't have like actual motivations. They just have these emotions guiding them that aren't really emotions. They're just kind of parts of the brain. So they're undeveloped and then they just have to turn control over. So this is just showing how unnatural it is to separate them because they depend on each other to make a person motivated to do things. You have to have a balance. And you can also see this in the book when Jekyll begins to turn to Hyde unbidden. And I'm not going to read all this, but there is symbolism in Jekyll being tall, Hyde being small, and as Hyde gets more evil, he grows. And you can see that because Hyde isn't restricted by his good thoughts. He is just evil. So he keeps on developing and getting more control over Jekyll. And you can see that that's not a good thing. You shouldn't separate them and leave them to only have their own motivations because then you're not going to arrive at good conclusions. Yeah, so that symbolism shows that. And then you can also see the theme of human imperfection within the theme of good and evil. Being imperfect is inherent to being human, and you can see that in Lorna's attitudes when she is listening to Jekyll's recordings about his experiments.
Hyde may still live on in me, even when I am Denman.
I think he was trying to be good.
The last remaining incalculable is my temperament.
That was the biggest mistake of his life.
For I have sharpened my capacity for evil as Hyde, which means that Denman cannot afford to lose his temper.
Trying to be more than human.
So, trying to be fully good means that you're trying to be not human. And it just doesn't work out because you end up tearing yourself apart. And then you can also see this in the book in Lanyon's attitudes towards Jekyll's experiments. Lanyon acts as a foil to Jekyll, where Lanyon values naturally healing the body and the mind in his practices, while Jekyll is trying to move humanity in a direction where it's better than human. And so when Lanyon sees Jekyll's experiments, he's disgusted by them so much that he dies because he represents nature and humanity. So when he sees this just disgrace of nature and humanity, he dies. So yeah, you can see that in their relationship. And Lorna acts as Jekyll's foil a little bit in the show as well. How does this theme pertain to this time and audience? Let's face it, people who are listening to BBC radio shows are probably on the older side, and if they're listening to this, they probably have read the book. So they're probably looking for the theme that they're used to with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is fully associated with the theme of good and evil. That is the allegory that we hear about so often with this book. They want to hear that. They want to hear a new take on this theme. They want to see it built upon. They don't probably want to hear something that makes them think like, oh, that's not really it. They want to hear the theme of good and evil fully explored in a way that wasn't in the book. So our last adaptation is called The Class Scientist. This is a web comic by Sage Contugno. Um, and it kind of purposefully takes all of the tropes from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde adaptations and flips them on their heads. This is done both to aid the plot and to point out some stereotypes that are harmful within like the archetypes of characters in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde adaptations. One of the ones we see most often is woman. In a lot of adaptations, women just kind of unquestionably bow down to Hyde. They are like taken over by his evilness, like they're really charmed by it, so they'll do whatever he wants. Um, but in this adaptation, no woman bows down to Hyde. They put him in his place, and frankly, no one is really afraid of Hyde in this adaptation. He's kind of pathetic. And that's really important to the theme of this webcomic, which I will get into and you will see why. The plot is that Dr. Jekyll is a 35-year-old gentleman of high society who founded the Society for Arcane Science in London, where he houses and funds scientists shunned by society for their experiments. He does not reveal that he is Hyde. He is ashamed of this experiment. Um, Things go wrong when Hyde accidentally sets fire to a large portion of London, as you can see. Um, Jekyll stops transforming into Hyde so that he will not be seen by the police. The police are after Hyde, so he hides within Jekyll. Unwillingly, Hyde struggles for power. He wants to take Jekyll over, and that causes the main conflict because eventually they begin changing between each other, just like in the novella. And shenanigans ensue. So the theme of this is the dangers of self-repression. So let's look at the reasons that Hyde exists in both the original and the webcomic. In the webcomic, Jekyll was a lower class Scot who comes to London for college and is taught by his friend Robert Lanyon how to be a gentleman. So he suppresses the side of himself that is a young boy from Scotland who is not well mannered. And you can see here he's saying I wanted to be the person you needed me to be, that everyone needed me to be. So I did what I had to do to become that person. So he is representing his society of mad scientists, and he has to put on this front to other people in high society to protect them. So he makes Hyde to separate himself so that he can be a good front while Hyde can go and do the fun stuff. So he also exists because of suppressed queerness. He also had a relationship with Lanyon in college when he was teaching him how to be a gentleman. But Lanyon had to get married to a woman to preserve his reputation. And so when they split up, there's this symbolism with Hyde is green, Jekyll is red. And you can see that they're splitting apart. Hyde is heartbroken, but Jekyll tries to ignore it, tries to smother that part of himself away. But he tasted freedom on his lips and could not forget its flavor. Hyde is buried down there, but he wants to come back out. He can't keep that part of him away forever. Um, so eventually, 15 years later, he creates Hyde so that he doesn't have a mental breakdown. So then the reason for Hyde's existence in the book, unnamed pleasures. Jekyll says, hence it came about that I concealed my pleasures, and that when I reached years of reflection and began to look around me and take stock of my progress and position in the world, I stood already committed to a profound duplicity of life. So he too is pushing down parts of himself for something that he believes would be detrimental to his reputation as a doctor in London. So he pushes himself down for the sake of his career. And basically, the ambiguity of this statement has kind of led people reading this book, especially younger people, to take it as a queer allegory. Especially because none of the male characters in the story have wives. It's all a bunch of middle-aged men who live alone and are kind of close but have their fringes. So there's speculation there, and it leads to adaptations that take this theme into consideration. And so this is part of why Hyde's evilness and his monstrous appearance have been dampened over the years. Um, the story is being taken more of a cautionary tale about suppressing yourself. And if you want to tell an audience that you shouldn't bury yourself, you're not going to make the part of somebody who comes out a murderous rapist, you know? Um, so Hyde is kind of becoming more sympathetic over time. And I don't know. I can't say if that's good or bad, but it's interesting. So how does this theme pertain to younger people who have read the book? I pretty much just said it. People who read the book these days who are queer will probably find some relatability. So this adaptation really speaks to them, and that's part of why it's been getting so popular over the years. Along with other Gothic novels, a lot of Gothic stories kind of can be interpreted this way. So yeah, it's interesting. So then final thoughts. None of these adaptations take away from the original story. You can't destroy the meaning of the original story by adding on to it. You can only add to the themes. You can only make them more developed. We shouldn't say, oh, this adaptation doesn't have this or this or this, because it's telling a similar story to corroborate on a theme that the creator liked and wanted to add on to. That might mean neglecting certain parts of the story, but um, by adding other parts on, you're making it your own story. And we should respect that. That's about it. Yeah, see ya.